Welcome, Stewart.
Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And let me just tell you, the technology is phenomenal right now. I have a great view of all of you, and I can see if you're laughing at my jokes or not. And I very rarely get that when I speak in Zoom. I'm usually looking at a blank screen. In fact, that looks like Nicoletta in the front row. Is that you, Nicoletta? Oh, great to see you. It's a great honor to be invited to speak at your conference, especially on a Friday afternoon where I'm the only thing between you and hopefully a nice evening and celebration of this great meeting I've briefly heard about. Why would I get up at 5 a.m. in Southern California? It was definitely the theme: evaluation for a better society. And this is both a topic that I've been thinking about for many years now, but also in preparing the few remarks I'm going to share with you today, it brought me back to my time in Sweden, which has been about a decade ago now, when I spent time as a visiting professor at the University of Malmo. But during that time, I got to visit a lot of places, including Stockholm. So thank you again. I'm feeling like I'm back with you, and I'm really looking forward to, we're planning about 15 minutes at the end of my talk for us to talk further about some of the topics that I raise. So I'm going to keep going with the tech and share my screen here. So this is my group. We used to meet regularly, like your meeting, and this, of course, now would be a super spreader, but we have a very active community in the western portion of the United States, near Los Angeles, in what we call the Claremont colleges. However, since the pandemic, a lot of our work looks like this. And I was telling the organizers, this was, at first I thought Zoom was the culprit behind the pandemic, but now I feel so thankful that we have a technology that allows us to continue to teach and spread good evaluation practice throughout the world. I lead an evaluation center called the Claremont Evaluation Center, and a training institute called the Evaluators Institute, and work with many faculty and students, and probably my favorite sort of group to work with are new and emerging evaluators. So for the last 20 years, we've been thinking deeply about the connections between the field of evaluation and its evolution and all of its complexities, as well as society, and how evaluation, may contribute to a better evaluation society. In the series, and you'll see the website here, what I plan to do is make my slides available to the organizers, so everybody can have a copy. And if you need a website like I'm listing here, you'll have it on a piece of paper, although typing in Google will get you there quick anyway. But we now have about 20 volumes that we've done. These are just a few of the latest ones we've done. One just coming out on practical wisdom for ethical evaluation practice, and one on system evaluation theory. But you can see we've been thinking about a lot of issues, the knowledge base in evaluation, sustainable, equitable future, equitable societies, and so forth. As we've been doing this work now, one of the, if we think of evaluation on one hand and society on another, we see this very, over 20 years, very productive evolution of our field of evaluation, and a lot of activity now going on in many parts of the world. So we see this, somewhat, progression or evolution of the field. In 2022, we're thinking society has moved much faster. And, we're now in some pretty challenging times, which I'll say some more about in a moment. But in some ways, the challenge is, how do we do evaluation given the societies we now find ourselves in, the challenges, the global crises, and so forth. So one sign that you may be very aware of, but I like to remind us, is that of dedicated organizations where people come together like you have and talk about evaluation, the latest practices, how to improve it. Estimates from a group called Eval Partners tell us now that there's more than 200 of these, what we call VOPEs, and with more than 55,000 members. And these are all distributed. Some are much larger than others. In the US, the American evaluation is now at about 7,500 members. And we're meeting next month in New Orleans for the first time since the pandemic. So the last few years have all been online, but we're actually coming face to face like you have here at your conference. There's also a newer organization called the International Evaluation Academy. Some of you may be in that, familiar with that, but I'm sharing a website because I do think it's worth taking a look at this group of volunteers that are committed to evaluation, policy influence, professionalizing the field, and transformative impact in society. I've just published, redone my initial text in program theory-driven evaluation science, and have a second edition now that is much more, geared to my classes and introducing new evaluators to this topic. But in the last chapter, I reflect on sort of the future of what I sort of use as one way of understanding our field, which is the transdiscipline of evaluation. So I'm going to say a little bit about how this transdiscipline has grown over, this period of time. And then I'm going to talk about, given the knowledge base we now have, what are some of the opportunities that we can now play in this new world we find ourselves in 2022. So when we describe evaluation as a transdiscipline, and this is just one way of describing our field, and some people debate that it might not be the best way. But we think about it as a discipline that cuts across a lot of other disciplines and a profession where we're practicing evaluation. And we now have developed some pretty good quality assurance standards, and we have many professional development opportunities. When we try to get into, what is a transdiscipline, we think about it as a discipline with a clear definition, a subject matter, a logical structure, and then multiple fields of application. So as you know, evaluation is critical for education, for public health, for public policy, for management, and the list goes on and on. But while we're living often out in these other disciplines or fields, we come together to talk about what are the latest and some of the new ways we can practice that. Even though we may be mostly in the health area, we're now talking with people from education and these other fields to really understand the core knowledge at the center of our transdiscipline. So here's just some of the key categories that we now think of as our knowledge base for this profession. So we have evaluation theory, design, the methods we use when we do evaluation, the practice itself, and all of the standards and competencies and so forth. The profession, and I just gave you a global look at the range of professional organizations now. And then something we spend a lot of time on at Claremont with our PhD students. We have around 50 PhD students specifically focusing on evaluation and improving the field. And we call this research on evaluation, studies to help us understand how best to improve the work that we're all doing. So I'm going to point out just two really important trends in our knowledge base over this time. And again, I do work in different parts of the world, but I certainly am heavily influenced, not by where I was born and where my family are, which is the UK, but where I mostly grew up and went to school, which is the US. So, and that's, my accent included. So know that a lot of my views are, shaped by the dominant culture and less so by the smaller smaller amount I've worked in other regions, but I do know there's a lot of similarities and also a lot of differences in our practices. So one of the really key trends that we see is there are now many types of evaluands. As we try to understand practice and study it, while program evaluation, at least certainly in the West, is probably the most popular and what people think about a lot when they write about our field. But as you know, there's policy evaluation, project evaluation, personnel, product, change interventions, evaluating organizations, evaluating systems, and most recently now, a lot of focus on transformation and evaluation, for transformation and trying to understand transformation. So this is quite a range of evaluands, and there are more. So one of the things we often now need to be clear about is which type are we doing, in our practice, or I should say which types. Sometimes when we get into a program evaluation, it turns out that we also need to evaluate the system that the program is embedded in to get, really good, accurate, and useful information. The other area that has just exploded in, at least in my view, is all the different types of ways we can evaluate programs and policies and projects and some of these other things. So much so that we now have classification schemes to help us try to understand what all these different approaches mean, how they might, be the best approach in a particular context. And so there's this rich diversity of ways we can go about doing our work. And I had the great privilege of reviewing the latest book, or the latest version, the third edition of Evaluation Roots by Marv Alkin and Tina Christie. And I really like their latest version of trying to classify the approaches, because it moves away from putting names on a tree to putting names of approaches on a tree. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's just out. This is the new evaluation theory, or if you think of these as approaches, the evaluation approaches tree. And in this classification scheme, just quickly, they organize our knowledge base now to do this work as being rooted in social accountability, social inquiry, epistemology. And then they try to place the set of approaches they've selected. There are more than 100 approaches, we think now. So this is just a subset of some of the ones that have got a fair amount of attention in our literature. But over time, each branch, those that tend to emphasize use, those that tend to emphasize methods, and those that emphasize valuing, has been growing over time to where you'll see developmental evaluation at the top of the use branch, evidence-based policy use and theory-driven at the top of methods, indigenous evaluation, culturally responsive, transformative, at the latest sort of ideas on the valuing branch. Now, let me tell you, this is really controversial, and people debate about, its value, and are things placed in the right, place? Should we have a social justice branch? So when I, spend a lot of time with Tina Christie, and I do co-teach with her, her view is this was always meant to be a teaching tool to help new and emerging evaluators, look at the different approaches and, of course, learn about them. So to pull this beginning together around the knowledge base, we now have a very rich knowledge base on how to do evaluation and work in evaluation practice from a number of different, let's call them vantage points or angle. So and Michael Quinn Patton has written an article that reflects this kaleidoscope, but we now have a kaleidoscope of options when we get out and we're trying to better society using evaluation. And a lot of our discussion has become under, what conditions do we do evaluation in a certain way, or go after a certain purpose of evaluation, or, what's going to work best in the context that we're being asked to practice in. As I mentioned, you have to know the options before you can really figure out which ones, fit your context or the context you're in. So this is the knowledge base, the evaluation theory, the different types of evaluation where we're trying to teach and help people sort of critically think about which approaches they would use, many they wouldn't, and when would they use them in what context. In working with these new and emerging evaluators, two things really jump out at me. The first one is still many of them call themselves accidental evaluators. They're sort of trained in another field, they're working in that field, and then in their effort to find meaningful work and make a difference in the world, they decide, they want to work in evaluation. They see it as a way to, contribute to society. And so they're motivated by doing work that leads to social betterment. And there's a lot of different, ways they see this. But what we do know is that people tend to be happier and more productive if they feel their work is meaningful. And so that's why I think it's really critical the way you did in the conference to, see the connections to society and how can this work, make contributions to society. Michael Scriven, we did a volume in our series on the future of evaluation in society, which was a tribute to him. He sees evaluation as social betterment. There's, that's what we're all about, and so forth. So unlike, what we used to see, and was this trend where people would come into the field to be methodologists or statisticians or technically oriented. And many of the new and emerging evaluators today are really motivated to do work that's going to contribute to a better society. We tried to map the different ways people, could improve society with evaluation. And unlike a tree, we came up with a more fluid metaphor where, and I did this with a colleague of mine who's now at Santa Barbara, Tariq Azam. The idea was evaluation practice is sort of a river that's leading into an ocean of societal improvement. And there's more than one way to get there. And people have told us in their writings and in their practice of a variety of ways to get there. Early on in our literature, accountability was the dominant way we thought, or the early theorists thought, that we would get to societal improvement. Next, you'll see a stream at the bottom of knowledge generation. And then more streams developed, determining merit, worth, and significance, evaluation use, emphasizing justice. And then these tributaries, or small little trickles started to develop off these other streams. On the knowledge, you'll see it was understanding program mechanisms. On the use, we had powering stakeholders, building capacity, and so forth. So this is just a visual that helps us, make the point that there are a whole number of ways now that you might be able to contribute to making a difference in all kinds of different aspects of society. So a very meaningful, energizing, opportunity for a lot of new and emerging evaluators in 2022. However, at the same time, and some people will say, well, if this is such a good practice and activity, why do we have so many problems in the world? Of course, that's not a fair question. It also, is a question that leads to paralysis. Another way of thinking about it is, wow, we've got, all kinds of, food insecurity. We've got, racism and discrimination. We've got people without health care. We've, massive global pandemic most of us didn't see coming. Now got war in Europe. And, there's never been a time where there's so many, challenges that evaluation, can attend to and spend its time, making a contribution. Solving a problem is much larger than any, I think, one field or one group of people, should strive for. Contributions towards striving, improving issues and potentially solving problems in the long term is probably much more realistic. So for your Friday afternoon, I want to frame the rest of my comments in something that is an evaluation example, and not a good one, of how people in society try to decide, what to focus on, where to go, what to purchase, and so forth. And this is called a top 10 list. And in the US, whenever you decide you want to travel, or you want to look for a hotel in an area you're going to, or a restaurant, or a place to live, or where to send your kids to college, we have all kinds of top 10 lists. Now, the problem with top 10 lists is they usually, some of them are very funny, and some of them are very sales oriented. They're trying to drive people, to the business. So we can never figure out, how is something a 10 and a 1, and it just sort of, organizes things for us. For example, just quickly for a Friday afternoon, it's not limited to the US. Sweden has the top 10 travel destinations, the top 10 Sweden universities. What are the top 10 waterfalls of Sweden? The top 10 surprising facts about Sweden. There's also top 10 lists of top 10 lists, including, the most watched YouTube video, the 10 worst college majors. There's also top 10 lists of the worst top 10 lists. The top 10 annoying things about top 10 list. Isn't that just another list? And of course, the ones that's on your mind for the weekend is, the top 10 things not to say on the first date, including, I have 7 cats. No, wait, 8. And, any chance you have some foot fungus cream handy, or, my third husband gets paroled next week. So top 10 lists are our way of remembering things and organizing, and a real joke and humor that we play around with. So I'm going to be serious with my top 10 list, but I'm now going to give you top 10 opportunities for evaluation to better society in 2002 and beyond. And like all the other top 10 lists, I have not done good evaluation and set up criteria and got these in any rigorous order. But there are 10 things that I think we can, and 10 sort of ways now that we can make a contribution in society in 2022 and beyond. The first one is what many people now say evaluation is way more than accountability. And even though we started with that, that's just, one small thing today. I would argue accountability is a lot of times our window into a topic, into evaluation. Still many funders and many policymakers and supporters of evaluation care about accountability. The trick in using accountability to improve society is making sure how you do this work is really tailored to the context that you're working in. Another great value of accountability, in my view, is that we now have a pretty good idea that when evaluation is part of any new funding or project, that it motivates people, to really use the funds well, to make sure they do their best to make a difference. And so you could think of this as, perceived accountability, even if, we can't clearly, demonstrate that something works or that it has a contribution or make a clear attribution. Just the notion that, valuation's involved and, there's that perception that we can, come close to that, can have great value in projects and programs and making a difference. What are some of these other things we can offer besides accountability, which many people think is what evaluation is primarily focused on? Capacity building and evaluative thinking come in at number 9 in my mind. And, we do a lot of this kind of work now, teaching people how to do evaluation in their own work groups, organizations, communities, and so forth, and provide a lot of support for what we might think of as internal evaluation versus an external group coming in. Also, we've learned that process use, not just using the evaluation, but what people learn from going through an evaluation can teach evaluative thinking that can then be used further to improve their work and to improve their work focused on bettering society. Continuous improvement. Almost anything I can imagine that's beyond the most simple and mundane can benefit from really good, clear, useful feedback. And so whatever we're trying to accomplish, if we're trying to help the homeless, new programs for refugees, education, is evaluation can help us in a sense get closer and closer to having an effective program that's making a real difference. And setting up continuous improvement loops are a very important benefit and a way to make a difference. The learning function, I showed you that on the stream as something that developed. This has evolved a lot, but each evaluation should produce some new knowledge, whether it's very local knowledge to the context, but there is often knowledge that's more general about that. So another way you can use evaluation to improve a society is by learning and enlightening people about the issues you're working on. We've had a lot of unrest in various parts of the world, certainly in the U.S., and have a real gun problem and so forth. And this has led to a lot of energy and opportunity for looking at evaluation practice as a way to promote social justice, to be more inclusive, bring more diverse groups into, the productive parts of society, and to really try to, make a difference for those that often, have been left out or discriminated against. And related to that, we're really focused now on equity-focused evaluations. And this has been going on for a while now, but it really has picked up a lot of steam. And so instead of looking at, does your program work overall, making sure the program is not disadvantaging certain groups or certain people. Is it reducing health disparities or education disparities, but really bringing an equity lens to our work. So again, my point is, as you begin working in evaluation, this is another option for how you might, focus your work to make a contribution. And I know Nicoletta has done some work on this, and something I'm fond of, and I'm now calling it strengths-balanced evaluations. We have a very clear sort of natural tendency to focus on what we might think of as negative events or deficits. And when we put on the evaluator cap, we think that even gets, stronger, that our job is to really hone in on the problems with this effort to make a difference in society. And the strength-based approach, or a strength-balanced evaluation, suggests that we want to also use good empirical data to understand a program or an organization or government or community's assets. And in our evaluations, to ask questions not just about problems or deficits, but also about assets. And I often, when I'm trying to use this approach, start with the assets, because I feel like people are much more, energized when they start to think about, the potential of the program, or what's going, really well. And by having, that conversation and thinking about evaluation questions from that lens, the deficits emerge naturally. So this is another, new, somewhat new approach we have that we can offer people in society to do our work. More and better research and evaluation integration. And this is one of the areas that I've done a lot of work in, is rather than seeing research and evaluation, as separate sort of enterprises, as well as rather than seeing them as exactly the same thing, more integration is a very useful way, I think, to practice evaluation today. I'm not going to show you this because of time. But if it comes up in the questioning, I will. There are great now databases that have been built, and some of them with great visuals and so forth, where we can use prior research, big data, social media analytics, machine learning, to provide a really good context for new programs and their evaluation. So sometimes when I meet with groups, I'm meeting with researchers that don't know a lot about evaluation. And I think one way to benefit both groups is, looking at the differences and integrating the two. We have a lot of knowledge in evaluation, and we certainly, in a lot of the areas we work in, we have a lot of knowledge to draw on from research. in 2015, when I was president of the American Evaluation Society, it was the International Year of Evaluation. And the theme we developed and the conference we held in Chicago invited people from all around the world to come to Chicago and tell us now in their part of the world what is exemplary evaluation in a multicultural world. And that work led to a number of professionalization type projects, and but one of them I want to emphasize is when you're working now in practice, reimagining what meta evaluation could do for your clients. And some of the initial models are, don't map onto our current practice very well. And so an opportunity we have is, before we get into the practice of, evaluating, is to really ask and, what would be an exemplary evaluation, and how do we, what are the criteria we use for that? So drum roll, please. We're coming to number one. And again, with no good metrics here and good criteria, just what I felt like putting number one on Friday afternoon for you and Friday morning for me. Program design and redesign. One of the things that really changed for us when the pandemic hit is many of the programs we were evaluating and working on shut down, and within a short period of time, then became interested in redesign. How do we, do this kind of work in our, global pandemic and our new world? And so we started to do using evaluation to help people, redesign, hopefully programs that were, doing okay in the pre-pandemic times to, programs that were really making a difference or could make a difference in, our pandemic times. And one of the, important concepts that I came away from in doing this work, a lot of our, practice has been, historical. Did this program, save lives if that's our outcome? And we're sort of looking in a crystal ball, and we're looking, backward, and we're using evaluation knowledge to try to say something about a program, that's already been delivered. But a real opportunity we have, now we have so much knowledge about, how certain types of things and programs work. Sitting at the table when we're trying to look at what do we now deliver to people, the program design and redesign phase, and using our knowledge in evaluation and research to build better programs for the future. So I'm gonna, of course, wrap it here, but I wouldn't be, complete without ending with the top 10 ways to end a presentation. And I'm not going to give you all 10. I'm just going to end by saying on that top 10 list, the number one, and I want to apply this for your conference and for this presentation, is one, to remember, a telephone you all used to have, but also the number one on the top 10 list is a call to action, and a call to action for impact. And I wish you all many productive evaluation adventures in the coming years. And again, thank you for letting me share my thoughts with you on opportunities, for us to make a difference and better society. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions? Swedish people are usually a little bit shy from the start. So.
Yes. Thank you very much for your encouraging, challenging, and intriguing talk so early in the morning. Thank you very much. My question is, we've had a discussion here at the conference about the situations in academia across the Nordic countries. And we see in all of the 5 Nordic Scandinavian countries that the competence building at the universities in terms of teaching, evaluation, preconditions and assumptions and all various models and U3, etc., is dissolving and in most places not in place at all anymore, which it was around the turn of the century. So I would like to first listen to you. What's your perception of that from the view of the United States and Northern America? But also, what recommendations do you have to the Scandinavian evaluation communities on that point?
Well, first of all, I'm really sad to hear that that observation or that challenge. One of the we've studied university programs a fair amount, and some of the data we have show that there's 45, 50 in the US, and then another, I don't know, 20 to 30 spread around the different parts of the world. When we look at whether a program, a university setting, the training evaluation, how long it's been there and so forth, we do see a lot of what we call turnover. Programs start, and the key thing I think we see is when the faculty move on or leave, a lot of programs don't continue. This is a tough one, obviously, but what I've always believed is once you get evaluation into the curriculum, and of course it's almost always paired with another field, and that's the nature of the trans discipline, building enough capacity so that it lives beyond you or the few people that have started the activity. But I think what it comes down to, at least potentially in your situation, is have we made a strong enough case for the value of teaching evaluation, particularly in the university. Faculty that I have worked with, and I've worked with many, and I evaluate a lot of faculties and do sort of personnel evaluation type of thing. They really lobby and argue for resources in their own areas of specialty. So again, I think it's can you develop a critical mass which may not be that large, of faculty that all care about this, and also students that see the value of this kind of training. Our highest demand, though, does come through our professional development opportunities. So one way that I'm consulting with people on this kind of activity, you start with, bringing people into the university and teaching them, people that, short professional development kinds of courses and workshops. And then you provide them maybe an opportunity for a certificate, and then, a degree. But there are very few programs in the world that are sort of, let's say, freestanding types of evaluation programs. Western Michigan University is one. And I also think that many of these programs are not solid or stable, even the ones you see, that have been around some time. So it is a dilemma. Many of the PhD students want to go into practice. They don't even want to deal with those challenges. But I lead by saying, how can you position evaluation and its value better in the university, and how can you build people around it so that it's not so fragile against people with different interests and that don't see it as an important thing to have in the curriculum.
Okay, some more questions, perhaps. We have time.
Yes, I have a question on evaluator competencies. The last part of your last point on your top 10 list was program design and redesign. And I would like to hear from you, do you think that the activity of sort of working with program redesign, does that also require us to develop new competencies as evaluators? And if so, what type of competencies do we have to develop to be able to work with evaluation, also looking more forwards, if I understood that idea correctly?
Great question. Thank you for that. So one of the things that came out of 2015 for when I was president was I put a task force together to focus on competencies. We could not agree on, what, as a field, what would be key evaluator competencies. 3 years later, that task force, we now have a document. And one of the challenges I see with competencies is, you've got to get some kind of agreement as a field on, what these are, they guide what we teach and so forth. But I think we've learned they're much better as kind of a professional development document, or, to give us, okay, what could I, learn? And a number of evaluators that I know are now, being asked to do the redesign piece, and they're using, evaluation knowledge, program theories, logic models to, facilitate discussions and have evaluation, as part of the design process. But, I don't know of, a formal competency that's, laid out with all of those components, but I'd sure like to see one develop, because as how much do we care about all the resources that are going to be put into a new problem, through programming, versus what's been done and, may even be over now, which a lot of times that's where we're asked to spend our time. So I see this as, a new direction for us that would strengthen our, value in society. If we could be there when people, are designing when they're putting millions of dollars into, services for, refugees of war, what do we know from evaluation that could be, helpful in that design or redesign process? So thank you for that. And believe it or not, I'm jumping on to do another talk on Zoom in just a minute or so. And I know this is the end of our time slot. So let me just say thank you so much for sticking around. And it's been great to hear some of your questions, and I wish you well in the work you're doing. Sorry to hear about the university. That's not good news.